is another Thunder Thursday Hangout. I'm Jenny Carlson here with the rest of our Thunder coverage team, Barry Trammell, Eric Horn, Anthony Slater, and yes, we're couch bound today, folks. Hey,
why not?
Mike Sherman leaves. It's time to mix it up a little bit, friends. So here we are in the Oklahoman studios, but ready to talk Thunder. And guys, we've got a lot to talk about. Let's start with this recent four-game road trip. You just got back, Anthony, so we'll let you go first. Fill in this blank. The Thunder's four-game road trip was?
It was weird, strange for everyone involved. I mean, even traveling on it. Eric had to go to the first game because I had to get to New York in time to get ahead of the blizzard. The blizzard that people thought were going to be bad, it was worse than they even predicted. I mean, it ended up, more than 2 feet of snow in New York. It's the country's biggest city, and it was stalled. The entire team got in at 4 a.m., and then Kevin Durant said he got in his hotel room at that would have been 4 a.m. Saturday, and didn't leave his hotel room until 4:30 p.m. Sunday to get on the bus to go to the game. The city was shut down. The snow was just piled up, slush everywhere, the cleanup crew. So that was weird. Then they lose to Brooklyn, play really poorly. I mean, we're talking about a Nets team that had lost 10 of 11 coming in. They'd scored, I think, 78 and 84 points the previous two games, dropped 116. They clearly missed Steven Adams in that game.
Yeah.
Then the next two games, they might have played worse defense. They go to Madison Square Garden, 122 gets put on them by the Knicks. Then last night, 123 by the Timberwolves. But they win both games. It was kind of a relaxed locker room yesterday, just, 3-1 somehow.
I thought that Knicks game, they almost looked more like they'd been in the hotel room. There were times when it just felt like they were sluggish to the point of not even having stretched their legs, guys. It just seemed, like you say, it is weird that they have such crazy numbers, but yet they come out 3-1 from that road trip. I mean, that it is very strange.
Testament to their offense. I mean, we are going to talk about the defense plenty today and how bad it's been, and it was really bad on this road trip. But they also scored 128. They also scored 126 last night. So, the offense is playing really well.
Okay, Eric, your turn. Fill in the blank. This Thunder four-game road trip was
treacherous. Even though they go 3-1, they get a bunch of guys beat up.
Yeah.
You got Steven Adams missing the Dallas game with that elbow strain he picked up in pregame. You got Andre Robertson getting his knee sprained when Russell Westbrook went for the crazy reverse layup. And then now we got Cameron Payne. We're waiting to see what happens with him with a concussion protocol. As Anthony wrote in the blog on Cameron Payne, Mitch McGary earlier in the season, he missed 8 days. So, we're probably not going to see Cameron Payne tomorrow against the Houston Rockets.
Yeah.
And now the Thunder, all of a sudden, they came into this road trip as one of the healthier teams in the league, and that's 2 starters and a key bench guy that you lost in this road trip.
And 2 starters that defensively, you mentioned missing Steven Adams, but, Andre Robertson, that's a huge defensive loss for this team.
Well, but they won't need him against Houston. There's nobody on – Houston doesn't have anybody that needs to be guarded by Andre Robertson.
No.
Well, you got Harden, Bradley Beal, Victor Oladipo, and Klay Thompson, Steph Curry the next 4 games.
Who possibly could he guard in any of those games?
Well, what we're seeing with Andre Robertson is what we saw when Kendrick Perkins would go out, which is the defense would just
So what's
go
the
out.
time? What's today? It's 2:06. Took 6 minutes to
Well,
say
let me tell you what, put me in charge. It'd take me 6 minutes to get him back in town, getting this team straightened out.
You can't get the 2011 version of Kendrick Perkins.
I don't even want him to play. I wouldn't.
Sit on the bench and scowl a little bit.
I wouldn't activate him for any game.
He's going to be a good big man coach in the league.
He's good. He's good locker room lieutenant, is what he is.
Well, that's what assistant coaches are a lot.
Well, I don't know, but Perk wouldn't sit there and let those guys pull some of those antics, transition defense, and not getting back. And
he's having a real big impact in New Orleans right now.
Well, they're a destitute team, but he had the ears of those guys in Oklahoma City.
He did, but some of that was on the court, and some of that's just through the play. And Tabo was good then. And
I would take Kendrick back in a heartbeat too, Barry, because I think you're right. I think that sheriff. He was the sheriff. Whatever you want to say about him losing a step or 2 as he was here a while defensively, okay, I get that. But he made the rest of those guys better by the sheer fact that they knew if they screwed up, they had to answer to Kendrick Perkins. And I don't think anybody in that locker room, including Kevin Durant, including Russell Westbrook, wanted to answer to Kendrick Perkins.
There's not 5 people on the face of the earth that Russell Westbrook listens to. but Kendrick Perkins is one of them.
Yeah.
Breaking news here: he's not coming back. So let's
That
move
we
forward.
know. Why couldn't he? What's holding it back?
A roster spot.
It's really only a matter of time. But Eric, you bring up a great point. Just the treacherous nature, which is interesting after Anthony's detailing the weather. I mean, I think a lot of people sort of expected that might become the treacherous part. And then you have a weird injury to Steven Adams in warmups, and then kind of Russell Westbrook again, his head meeting Andre Robertson's knee.
Second time they've combined to injure. The last one was
Dented.
funny. A lot weirder, worse looking injury. You know, Russ Westbrook's face get dented, but he gets surgery, but he only misses one game. Robertson, it's a knee sprain, but he's going to miss at least 3 weeks.
Yeah, and I have to think, Eric, to your point, I mean, seeing Steven Adams back on the floor on Wednesday night, definite positive, even though the Wolves still score a bunch of points, but you'd rather have him back than not, especially if Robertson's out for a while.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and just think if Steven Adams wasn't going to be in the game with Houston coming up. I mean, James Harden might have dropped 50 regardless, but now with Robertson out, and fortunately you got Steven Adams back. I mean, what, 40? I'm thinking.
I actually
81 might be out of the question.
I'll
but
say this: just being on the road with them, and now that they're coming back home, I think they're going to play pretty well defensively tomorrow against Houston. Houston's not playing well at all. They just got blown out, I think, by 31 by the Spurs.
Torched them.
They've had issues all year. They've already fired their coach. I think they're going to play well against you. I don't think Harden's going to drop 50 and they're going to drop 120. I might be wrong, but
And the fun
and
is,
I'm not saying that they've solved everything.
Robertson clearly is the option you'd like. However, Dion Waiters is a solid defender. He's done an excellent job. I got nothing bad to say about the job Dion has done this year in trying to be that two-way kind of guy.
Yeah, so actually, the Knicks game we talked about, I know they gave up all those points, but some of their best defensive possessions were when the Knicks were, for some reason, trying to post up Aaron Aflalo on Waiters, and Waiters was holding his own, and Derek Fisher just kept going to it for whatever reason. That was really weird.
All right, Barry, you get the last word on the fill in the blank. What was this road trip?
It was a B. It was a B. You go on a 4-game road trip against 4, one good team, Dallas, and 3 not so good teams. You want to win them all, and that's an A, but if you win 3 out of 4, it's a B. And that's about what the Thunder's been this year is a B. We'd like them to be a lot better so they can compete with San Antonio and Golden State, but that's not where they are right now, so they're about a B.
All right, so let's get into these defensive issues because, Anthony, you're right. We do need to talk about the defense and what is going on here because, to me, guys, Barry and I talked about this on the press row this morning, that I think that this road trip for me was sort of an affirmation that it looks like this is a team that's just going to have to strictly try to outscore teams, which obviously you'd want to outscore people. That's the name of the game. But I really think this is a team that's just going to have to hope to win games in that 123 to 120 kind of range if this is how the defense is going to be. I know guys are missing, but is there anything that can take them back even slightly to the defensive disposition days that Sam Presti liked to talk about so much? Eric, what is at the heart of these defensive issues?
Well, I think it's just a focus thing more than anything. I mean, it seems like it's a different defensive issue to me from night to night. It'll be a guy leaving his man on the corner. It'll be allowing too many points in the paint like last night to Minnesota. So every night it seems to just hop from thing to thing, and it magnifies the issues when you get guys hurt. This is really the worst case scenario for them in terms of guys being injured because you wanted them to get correctly defensively when they had everybody in at the same time. Now they're going to have to find ways to correct these defensive inefficiencies with guys out. And I mean, from it being so inconsistent from night to night, it's going to be harder to do with Robertson out for as long as he's going to be out.
Is it focus, Barry?
Well, I guess. I mean, I don't know what exactly that means. I don't know. Desire, concentration, focus. Eric the Red is right. It's different things every night. They're getting beat in transition too much, and it's not because they're not fast enough. I mean, if you got a bunch of non-athletes, that's one thing. But this is one of the more athletic teams in the league. They shouldn't be beaten to the end of the court. And some of it is they get back and they just stop at the foul line, and somebody leaks behind them for an easy shot. So that's just a lack of attention to detail. That's really what defense is attention to detail. And that, going back to Perkins, that's the thing he was big on. He was big on the details. And sometimes, and I think Adams is really good because he pays attention to detail. And when they don't have him, That's not good. Now, a great sign. Last night, after 3 periods of awful defense, they actually found some defense, and it was with the B team, with Cantor, Augustine, and Anthony Morrow on the
3
court.
lockdown defenders.
Terrible defenders, and yet they shut down Minnesota for the what
They
the
didn't
T-Wolves
score.
had
They
like,
didn't score for like 5 minutes.
yeah, and they had like 5 points the first 8.5 minutes of the quarter. So,
And then Zach Levine had about 50 the last 5 minutes.
but they had some good. So they're capable.
Yeah.
They're capable, and we know Westbrook and Durant and Ibaka and all the veterans are capable of good defense. And it's not like they're past their prime. They can still do it if they will just commit to doing it.
Haven't we talked about this team, guys, in context of, getting built towards the playoffs? I mean, obviously, this team is not at the level of the Golden States and the Spurs right now. I mean, that's pretty obvious. But sort of building to be playing your best in the playoffs. And when you start talking about not paying attention to detail, not having focus on defense, however you describe that to me doesn't feel like a team that's going to find itself in mid-April and be like, all right, now we're ready to play our best basketball.
We could talk about all these things. It's really hard to do. There's only 2 teams doing it that are every night, playing super well. Kevin Durant, who's been like incredibly honest this season with the press, sometimes far too honest, back and forth. He's talked about it recently. He talked about it last night. He even said something in the Knicks game. Just it's January out. We get bored. He thinks the team can get bored. It's day to day. They do the same thing every day. They go to practice, then they do this. And January is the hardest month for the dog days type stuff because the start of the season, the excitement of the season's worn off. The playoffs is still far away. They just went on a strange road trip that we've mentioned through this blizzard in Minnesota and different stuff like that. You're right. They need to lock in more, to get to that next level. But this is not an easy thing to do at all.
Right. No, and I'm not saying that, but I think the frustration, and this is a question we'll get to in a second, but I think a lot of the frustration with fans, with pundits, with watchers is you see these flashes of really great basketball on a team that obviously has fantastic potential, but they've had several years in the past where they've tried to flip that switch on. Granted, in the playoffs, they've had injuries derail things, but we've seen it a lot with this franchise, that there's sort of this thought that playoffs are here, let's go play great basketball. And I just thought that they would get to the point in their evolutions and their maturity where they would build to that point, and we just haven't seen that with these guys. I'm a little bit surprised. You say it's hard, I get that, but you've got Durant and Westbrook and Ibaka in the prime of their careers, and I thought this was where we would start to see that from these guys.
I think there's one silver lining, or maybe it's a hope that Thunder fans can sort of cling to. If you remember back to the golden years in 12 and 13 when they were, I was going to say they were an elite team. They're an elite team now. They're on a 60-win pace.
Yeah.
So
That's the point in all this.
Yeah.
It's just this Warriors-Spurs thing is just screwing
It has-
everyone's
it has
mind
its
up.
Clouding
due.
everything, yeah.
But back in 12 and 13, they would still go through a 3 or 4 game slump where you think, what are these guys doing?
Yeah.
The difference now is that the problem, defense, is lingering and coming back. When they correct it, it comes back. Correct it, it comes back.
And against bad teams,
Yeah,
too, Barry.
yeah, that's right, against the Minnesotas and the Brooklyns. However, this is a new coach, and they are implementing new systems and new ways of communicating. And we want them on high. We want them on high level of performance by a January and a February. But maybe it's a case of it takes longer than we suspected for everything to gel. DJ Augustine, perhaps I mentioned this in the past. DJ Augustine said back in November, he said, you know what, adjusting to a new coach, the offense comes pretty easy. We get that. He said it's the defense that takes a long time to sort of to gel. So maybe there is hope that they will continue to get better on defense. And by April, maybe they will be playing at a higher level.
The defensive issues, the heart of it, we haven't asked you yet, Anthony. What you saw the last three games up close and personal, saw a lot of points being scored. What do you put your finger on with that?
Well, it's a lot of things. I think number one, it is somewhat of a personnel issue. I mean, Enes Kanter's got to play 20-something minutes a night. He's just not good. He's not capable of playing good defense. I mean, he's getting better, but it's like pushing along like a young child in some ways. And then, Waiters has his lapses. Morrow, Augustine. We've talked about. I mean, they cannot be an elite level defense with some of the guys they're rolling out there. But and the seesaw that is, they can be a really good offense, which we're not talking about. But like I said, I mean, they won last night because they just said they will outscore you.
Yeah.
So I do think in some ways it's a personnel thing, and then the other it's an energy thing. It's what Kevin Durant's talking about. I mean, to be a championship level team, they have to lock in every night, but they're just not doing it.
Well, and you guys hear these questions, so you bring it up personnel. I hear them, you hear them. Anytime, we get emails, chats, whatever the case is, people want to know, trade deadline. Is this team making a deal? Do they have to make a deal? Is something coming, Barry?
The odds say yes. Sam almost always does make a deal. What's the difference this year is it's a little bit harder to see coming. I mean, last year we knew Reggie
problems.
Jackson was
Yeah.
headed out, and somebody, a big man likely, was coming in. We, didn't know exactly who. Maybe a Brock Lopez, maybe an Enes Kanter.
Brock Lopez.
Brooke Lopez.
Brock's the third of the.
First of all, Brock sounds like a way cooler name.
No kidding.
Brock
A
Lopez
guy
would be
that
a
guy goes
baller
at 30
center.
for 30 and 10 ought to be Brock Lopez. But so probably a trade's coming. We just can't really know who or what the parameters might be.
Look, if I told Sam Presti you can make that move and it's going to make your team better, he'd make the move. Where is the move?
Who's the obvious?
I don't know. It
Yeah.
might be out there, it might be made, but like
And even if it makes sense on this side,
Does it make sense?
will it make sense on the
Yeah,
other?
no, I've seen plenty of people like, man, we could really use a Will Barton right now. I'm like, yeah, they would love to have Will Barton. Why would the Nuggets give him up? They just signed like a cheap, stuff
Right.
like that where it's like,
It's got to make sense
like,
both ways.
who?
Somebody gets on the chat earlier this week and asked me who's the one player in the NBA who would help the Thunder most right now in a trade. I'd be like, I said Steph Curry. It's like everybody wants this two-way. Everybody wants a two-way wing. A two-way wing. Teams don't give up two-way wings easily.
Especially in this climate of
Yeah.
the NBA.
And they're not cheap.
No.
The ones that they are giving up are ones that are going to cost you a lot of money or are overpaid.
The only guys you could get are guys on expiring contracts, and they're very pessimistic about re-signing. So maybe they can get something out of an Oklahoma City.
like Waiters. That's why they
a
have
Waiters or Kent Bazemore, somebody like that.
Well, now Kent Bazemore, I don't think they're going to be able to get him.
I've seen Courtney
Hawks like
Lee's
him.
name thrown around.
Yeah, he's thrown around. That's true.
The
It's
problem
an interesting one.
It is Memphis would have to be willing, especially Memphis would be giving it to their potential first round opponent.
Right.
So I
But
don't.
where is Memphis? I think that you're right. You have to think about what's the flip side benefit, and is Memphis ready to just say, all right, we gotta start over. We gotta let some contract go. This is a move.
Yeah,
we
and
gotta make.
to do that they have to give up a piece, which is like a Mitch McGarry.
Yeah, or Cameron Payne.
Oh, yeah, you gotta give up somebody
If I was
else.
Memphis, I'd say, yeah, I'll give you Courtney Lee, give me Cameron Payne.
Yeah, no,
Good deal.
Cameron Payne is the Thunder's best, giveawayable, I guess, asset right now. But do they even? I mean, is he even touchable right now?
I wouldn't.
I
I mean, I'd
wouldn't.
think long and hard about trading Cameron Payne for Courtney Lee.
Well,
I mean, I wouldn't do it, I don't think.
I don't think.
No,
I don't think.
No,
I
I
would
don't-
have
I don't
Thunder.
think-
I mean,
Because they might not be able to keep Lee as the other.
and I'll
thing.
tell you right now, I know who for sure wouldn't do that is Sam Presti. I mean, that's a guy on a rookie scale deal that they like his mindset or the Thunder culture.
Right.
So,
And in the old days, so many trades were made based on salary, and either salary dumps or sending somebody a contract they could cut and all kinds of things. And with the exploded salary cap, a lot of those issues are passe. They don't really exist anymore, or won't for several years.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
well, then the other thing is like, okay, let's say you guaranteed me Cameron Payne for Courtney Lee would help the Thunder this season. It would make the Thunder better. Is it going to make them? Does that vault them to Warriors Spurs level?
Right.
Like, who's a two guard out there that vaults them into like suddenly they're just playing this historically great basketball because they got Gary Neal or something or
Yeah.
Wesley Matthews.
Wesley Matthews would. Those
Dallas isn't going to get
yeah,
him.
No,
not
but
like
it-
you're
yeah.
not
Mark
exactly.
Cuban's not interested.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the only type
Klay
of.
Thompson would really help this team.
Yeah.
I think just go get
It might hurt their rival too if you could just Cameron Payne for Klay Thompson. But so to me, there's no point in trading like a 3-4 years of a Mitch McGarry, a Cameron Payne for a guy like Courtney Lee that he could potentially
Help
swing
you
a
a
few
bit.
games in the regular season, maybe win you a playoff game, but you're not suddenly beating the Warriors because of Courtney Lee. You're beating the Warriors because Westbrook, Durant get hot and this team comes together and Klay Thompson tweaks an ankle in Game 5, and you still won Golden State.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we've talked all about the weirdness, the issues, guys, but let's talk about some positives because you bring up a good point earlier, Anthony. The whole idea that this is a team, or Barry, on pace for 60. I mean, this is a team that could easily win 60 games, and yet people are wringing hands, fans, pundits, everybody else. I mean, has there ever been a case where you've seen this sort of thing happen with a team that is still an elite team, and yet people are essentially, oh my gosh, what can be fixed here? What can be done, Eric?
It's the standard, I mean, you've got 2 of the top 5 players in the NBA. It's and the 2 teams that are ahead of them have been so good, and they don't have those double-digit losses. I think we get caught up in the amount of losses too, because the Thunder had this big number compared to the Spurs and Golden State. And I know that seems simple, but the standard is so high that you tend to overlook how good this team really is, and that they still have room for improvement, considering they have a first-year coach. You have a guy in Enes Kanter who hasn't been with the team for more than a year and change. You've got a rookie that's been your top scorer off the bench for the past 2 weeks, or your top wing scorer, and you've got a guy in Durant that's coming off an injury that's playing at an MVP level.
It's a few things. It's desperation, number one. We could talk about all the improvement, but there's a chance these 2 top 5 transcendent guys won't be here in 2 years.
Sure.
Durant could leave this offseason. It's a fan base that thought they were going to have 2-3 titles by now, and now it's like there's a legit chance they won't ever have a title, especially with what the Warriors have become. So it's a worry there. And then as far as just strictly their play, I mean, we talked about the defense. The other thing is they played a really, really soft schedule. Like, who's the best team they've played? They've gone 24-5, I think, in the last 20.
Spurs in the opener and Cavaliers of late. I mean, that's really
They
really
won
who
at
they're
LA. They won at the
Yeah,
Clippers.
at the
That's their
Clippers.
best win.
Yeah. I mean,
So but it does stiffen up a lot here in February.
Yeah.
they have 34 games left. 12 of them are against either the Rockets, Spurs, Clippers, or Warriors. 3 against all 4 of those teams. It's double-sided because obviously it's going to stiffen up, and that might make fans worry more if they lose those teams. But I'm very interested to see how this Thunder team responds, because talking to Durant and all them, and how it's just it's January, and we're doing the same thing. It's not going to be the same thing tomorrow when they're at home and Patrick Beverly's in the building, James Harden's back, the Rockets are here.
Yeah. They've
been kind of hearing the critiques. How do they come out in those games? How do they look against the Warriors the day before the Super Bowl when they're kind of on that big stage?
Sure.
I'm excited.
It's one thing that it's January. It's another thing that you're playing the Minnesota Timberwolves for like the 3rd time in 3 weeks.
It's true.
I mean, if they had played Houston in that many times, I mean, there would be more joy or excitement, so to speak, over a win.
It's a weird schedule glitch that they've sort of been through with some of these not great teams on their schedule all in a row.
And everyone deals with it, though. Let's not sit here and be
that's
like,
true. That's true.
But the good news is maybe this steady diet of the great teams you mentioned, especially the Warriors, especially the Spurs, maybe that does sort of refocus the Thunder. Maybe that does energize them. Maybe that does sort of give them a jolt when they wake up the morning of those games.
I think it has to. I mean, as far as if they play the Warriors well, even beat the Warriors, maybe the confidence is up. Or even if they go into Golden State and get popped by 35, they're going to
change the equation.
That might make them look at each other. That might make Sam Presti rethink things. I just think playing these teams is going to give us a platform to see where they really are when they're in the environment that are like playoff environments. Because last night, they're not playing it like it's a playoff game.
No.
They
Because
should.
it doesn't feel that
February
way.
6th at Golden State is going to, how would this team potentially match up in a playoff?
Okay, I don't know if you can say that all of those games against those great teams is a reason for optimism, because the Thunder's going to have to kick it into gear, but there's got to at least be some reasons for optimism. What do you like most, Barry, that maybe if there's fans out there that say, woe is us, and need a little jolt of optimism?
Well, the offense is excellent.
Yeah.
I mean, the offense, they're going to score. That's just going to happen. It's not a question of, they're not going to lose a playoff game 89-86. We saw that some in 12 and 13. Remember those Memphis series?
Yeah.
That became so low scoring? We're not going to see that in the playoffs. If the Thunder loses in the playoffs, it's going to be 111-106. It's going to be, even though playoff basketball becomes a grind, even though it slows down, but it becomes more low scoring, they're going to be able to score. And the thing I like about the offense is they can do different things now. It's not just the Westbrook-Durant show, and it's not just having Kanter, somebody you can throw it into the post to. They do run better offense than ever before. The pick and rolls, the Adams and Ibaka's, waiters off the bench. You got the Cameron Payne and Anthony Morrow as different kinds of options. They're an outstanding offensive team. So, they're going to have a puncher's chance in every game they play in the playoffs. So and here's the other thing. Effort and focus and those kinds of things don't really come into play on offense as much. They do on defense. If you'll make up your mind early enough, you can make a difference with your will on defense. So if Billy can reach these guys early enough in the process, which I don't mean game 5 of a playoff series, I mean like in February and March, and get ready for the April run of the playoffs, the defense can improve.
Yeah. Eric, optimism?
Optimism, as poorly as he started, I'm liking what I'm seeing from Kyle Singler in the past couple of weeks. Honestly,
I did not think he was going there.
Look, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things I could say. I mean, I'm optimistic about the way that Durant's playing. I'm optimistic about Russell Westbrook's distribution. I'm really optimistic about Kyle Singler coming off the bench and providing something. Because he's that 6'8", 6'9" guy that can guard a couple of different positions that you're going to need against Golden State and San Antonio.
Yeah.
He was excellent in the transition defense against Dallas. He had some key stops in that game.
Yeah.
Comes in with putbacks. I mean, he wasn't great against Brooklyn and New York, but who was on defense against Brooklyn and New York? But Kyle Singler, if he's going to bring anything, if he's able to provide some sound defense and make a couple of shots, that's going to make it easier for the entire team. It's not going to put as much weight on Kevin Durant to have to play. When they're playing these all-bench lineups, it's not going to put as much weight on those guys to come back in and score and make up the difference.
You may not know you need Festus Ezeli until you need Festus Ezeli. I mean, like he had a couple big baskets in the finals, and who would have thought you would say that about anybody? So who knows when a Kyle Singler play might come in handy. What about optimism, Anthony?
I just think it's Russell Westbrook offensively, his ascension to consistent great basketball. Barry's talking about this offense that looks so much better, and it's the pick and rolls, and he can run the pick and roll with Adams with the lob. He can run it with Kanter, where he can throw those quick bounces that Kanter can catch. The pick and pops with Ibaka. They can do the 3-run pick and roll with Durant and Westbrook, which is almost unstoppable at times. And he's willingly doing it, and you could tell he's enjoying himself. He just seems so much more mature from an offensive standpoint that. There's not really the concern that he's just going to go kind of like psycho Russ offensively. Yeah. I mean, he did a little bit in Brooklyn.
They did in Brooklyn, but that's the only time all year.
Yeah. So it's I think that's the reason because he does it almost on an every game basis now, that's the reason to believe this offense is going to produce pretty steadily. And then the other optimism thing with Russell Westbrook is that you throw him in a series against a Steph Curry, against a Chris Paul, Tony Parker, he knows he's on the big stage. Yeah. He's going to be walking into the arena wearing his poncho, and he's going to be locked.
Wait,
he's going to be
is
locked
it cape
in.
or poncho? Poncho or cape?
Both. It's a poncho cape. It's a Slayer jersey.
Although
I will say this, we're never going to see it again. I mean, once he wears it once, it's gone.
Yeah,
I mean, at least from. But I'm just saying, podium Russell Westbrook with the outfits, with the.
Sure.
I'm not there's no reason to believe he's going to shut down Curry or shut down any of those guys.
But he loves those one-to-one matches.
I just think he's got to be more focused because he's going to get if he plays a defense like he's been playing, on the Zach LaVines of the world, on the Stephen Currys.
Yeah.
He's going to get roasted to a level
60.
that'll just infuriate him.
Yeah.
So that I think he's the biggest reason for it.
Okay, you bring up Steph Curry. Let's fast forward just a little bit, guys. Not this weekend, but next weekend, Super Bowl weekend. You mentioned earlier, Saturday night in the Bay.
I can't wait.
It'll be Thunder and it'll be Warriors, and some of the plagues of Egypt have returned to this team with injury. I mean, we can't know who's going to be back and who's going to be available for that game.
Andre Robertson will not play. Steven Adams is, we talked about him earlier, but he's already back.
Mm-hmm. So
who knows about?
But what is that? What does all that do? Does it take any shine in you guys' mind, Eric, off that game and what's coming up here on February 6th?
It doesn't take any shine off the game. It's still going to be a heavyweight fight, so to speak. But I mean, the Robertson thing obviously hurt you. You want him in the lineup, being able to go at Steph or Clay or anybody that they would dispatch him against in the starting lineup. So, I mean, it's still going to be an event. It's still going to be the game of the night, the game of the weekend.
Yeah, and let's not over-exaggerate Robertson here. I really think in a lot of ways the Warriors probably play him off the floor if they go small and you know, like, or remember what they did to Tony Allen in the playoff series last year, where they
Put
had
Bogut
Andrew
on him.
put Bogut on him and say, "Oh, shoot." Worst part about that is Tony Allen actually is like, "Yeah, I'm gonna shoot." Robertson wouldn't like, "Here, give me the ball." Tony Allen was like calling the Warriors out after it. But it's just, I don't, you know, he does. It's weird because like one side
The way
of
the matchups are, he might not have played a huge role anyway.
I don't think so, because I really think the Warriors, you know, he would. I don't think he'd be in the closing lineup. He really never is in the closing lineup. It's very rarely. But at the same time, like if Klay Thompson's doing what he did last night, he had 45 last night, like you're gonna want Andre Robertson. But every team deals with a minor thing. As long as none of the big guys are out, let's see what happens.
Here's what's great about the schedule. We talked about how easy it's been. Here's what's great about it, and this idea that the Thunder is not at the elite level. Not for NBA minds, but for their own minds, they've got 6 opportunities down the stretch to show themselves and the Spurs and the Warriors that they're on that level.
Yeah.
You go win 2 out of 3 from each,
Yep.
and who cares what the final record is and what the seeds are in the playoffs?
Those other teams
All of a
win
sudden-
70 games,
All of a
doesn't
sudden,
matter.
the playoffs are wide open.
Yeah.
Now, if the Thunder goes 1-5 in those 6 games, well then, but if you hold your own against those guys, the playoffs look completely different.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like, let's just hypothetically, let's say they don't play that well to end the season. They lose to a Sixers. They lose some bad games. They lose to the Timberwolves at home. They go into Sacramento and lose. But at the same time, they go 2-1 against the Warriors and 2-1 against the Spurs. And then suddenly a Spurs Thunder series is about to start. You know, all the pundits are like, but if we look at this season series, it's 3-1. We like the matchups. Like, the narrative will turn on the Thunder that, hey, they may not always lock in, but they match up well with these teams, and talent-wise, they're right there.
I got to tell you guys, as I look at the Spurs and the Warriors, and I know how well they're both playing, but I still think of the Spurs as a team that the Thunder matches up well against, just from a standpoint of the age of some of those guys, just the things that the Thunder can do. And I know that Kawhi Leonard is much improved over what he ever was in any playoff series before against the Thunder. I know that they've got some different pieces in that way, but I still like the Thunder matchup with the Spurs. When I think about can the Thunder elevate enough to potentially win a championship, in my mind it's all about the Warriors. Now, I don't have any idea what this game in San Francisco and Oakland here in 9 days is really going to tell us, but to me, that's, if you're thinking gold standard, where does this team need to be? To me, that's it, because of the matchups, because of what they bring on the floor when they're at their best. I just think that's the team. And I'm trying to decide how much stock to put in that game. I mean, do you put a lot of stock in a regular season game like that?
Well, I think you do, because I don't think the Thunder even has to win to gain mental
Some
advantages.
yeah.
Look what the Warriors have been doing to teams, what they did to San Antonio, what they did to Cleveland. You do that a couple of times in the regular season, that inflicts psychological damage, even to somebody like the Spurs who have seen everything. If the Thunder can go out to Oakland and just play tough, even if you lose 111, 106, you don't walk away from there thinking, oh, we got no shot in the playoffs. You walk away thinking, hey, we got a shot.
I look at it, I keep thinking of that KU-OU game that we saw a few weeks ago. I mean, OU didn't win the game, and they ended up making a turnover at the end to lose the game, but they went up there and played in a hostile environment, and they came away with a confidence. And I think that if the Thunder, I was about to call them OU, if the Thunder could go out to Oracle and not necessarily win 2 out of 3, but play tough.
Right.
And show some grit in some certain situations, and go out and maybe lose, like Barry said, by 5 or 4. And we're not trying to make moral victories or anything, but it's a confidence thing. And it's one thing if they're losing those games in the playoffs where they matter, but if they can take that into the playoffs, that they played them tight and they played them close, and they're not getting smashed by 20 points, then that's got to go a long way.
Well, and then if you're in a playoff series, there's a chance that you go and steal one. That would be, I mean, the Warriors are going to have 4 regardless. So if you're close, if you're within a couple possessions, then the idea that you could potentially go steal one, and if you hold home court, maybe you knock those guys off, that changes the dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, and I know this is a different level that the Warriors have reached, but I mean, we've seen this core of the Thunder play that core of the Warriors before, and Kevin Durant historically has just torched the Warriors. I mean, he had 54, his career high. And they beat him at home without Russell Westbrook. And I know this was not as good a Warriors team, but then they played them last year in Golden State when they were reaching that level. I mean, they won 67 games last year, and there was that first half where Durant had just come off the foot surgery, and Westbrook and him went off. Durant had 30 points in the first half, most he's ever had in the first half, but then he drove the lane literally on the last possession and sprained his ankle on Maurice Spates, missed 4 games, and the foot was never the same. Everyone knows what happened last season. But just the fact that he went there on Draymond Green, on Andre Iguodala, on all those great defenders, and just dropped 30 in a first half in Oracle Arena. Crowd was going crazy. I mean, I know those two are going to be confident going in there.
Sure.
Any game that they go in there. Even if they lost by 30 and then they get a playoff series later, those two will be confident. I'm more concerned about the other guys. How's Dion Waiters going to be in that environment? Enes Kanter, do the Warriors play him off the floor going small? Just kind of how the fringe guys play, because I think the 2 stars, they have pretty favorable matchups.
Going to be interesting, guys. That's still 9 days away. We got the Rockets on Friday night here in town. It's going to be interesting. That's all the time we've got, though, for Thunder Thursday this week. So be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.